Good evening, everybody. And the usual housekeeping rules. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function? If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair or Democratic Services officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic officer know. Thank you very much. Which takes us on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, apologies have been received from Councillor Lynch-Wilson.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2023. Does anybody have any concerns they'd like to raise? Would they like me to go through this page by page or move on block? I can't see any hands. Yes, Councillor Neil Thomas.
Yeah, I'll move on block if that's okay.
Thank you. I'll second that. Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Moving on to agenda item 4, I believe that Lance would like to speak before Gemma comes in, which is the finance report. This is to the refresh of medium-term financial plan 24-25 to 28-29, the Cabinet report on the 16th of November 2023.
If I may, Chair. Apologies to interrupt, Chair, but could we do the declarations of interest, please?
Certainly. Do we? Sorry, everybody. Do we have any declarations of interest? Or whipping declarations? No. Thank you all very much. As I say, agenda item 4. Lance wanted to introduce this. Can I bring you in, Lance? Can't hear you, Lance.
Sorry, can I just check you can hear me okay now?
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a brief opportunity to discuss, I suppose, the whole suite of reports that are on the agenda this evening, because I think there's a degree of complexity within them, and I think collectively they present quite a substantial challenge for us as a directorate and indeed for us as a council. And I thought it was just worth me just setting the scene, I suppose, for them before we started and got stuck into each of them individually. The finance reports that you will see this evening, amongst other things, indicate and show the level of overspend that we have currently within social services, which is primarily as a result of a significant increase in demand. A story that Scrutiny Committee members will be familiar with because we have talked about it before, but I think it's very much evidence within those reports. At the same time this evening, we have the Children and Young People Services Annual Placements Review, which looks back at the last year and really, I suppose, provides the detail of where a lot of the money in children's services has been spent in terms of us supporting those vulnerable children and young people within the service. And then I think item 7, although I think it would probably make most sense for that to come afterwards was the market stability report, the annual update, which is a forward-looking report, which in response to that additional demand and the challenging demographics that we have in the Vale of Glamorgan, endeavours to set out the I suppose the list of services and developments that we need to adequately support our population going forward. I'm just conscious that those three reports have the potential to pull us in different directions, and I thought it was important to highlight that before we started the evening, and to assure members that that is something that is recognised and understood, and is something that we will undoubtedly find challenging, but is something that we are intent on dealing with. So I don't want to take up any more time on a general introduction. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Lance. Yes, we have three financial reports this evening, none of them very pleasant reading. And I will now hand you over to Gemma for agenda item 4, please. Gemma.
Hi, good evening. So for the is a reference cabinet, which leaves the financial. I'm just going to try and.
Sorry, Gemma.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Gemma. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We do have a bad audio line, I'm afraid, from you at the moment.
Should I turn my office?
Yes, if you keep your request to speak button on, but just mute the camera. Would you mind just speaking for me now to make sure that's working?
Okay, Amy, is that any better?
It is much better, yes, Gemma. Would you mind presenting like that? I'm terribly sorry, but
No,
at least we can hear you properly.
no, that's no problem. Amy, in that case, would you be able to share the slides on my behalf, please?
Yes,
Is that okay?
yeah, absolutely. We've got that ready here. Would you like us to put the first slide up now?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, just bear with us one moment. One second, Gemma. Bear with us 1 minute. Gemma, would you mind just taking your request to speak off momentarily, please? Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Apologies for the momentary delay. Hopefully the presentation is now displaying on your screen. So Gemma, if you would like to press your request to speak and keep your camera off, please. We can see the presentation now.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Amy. So if you could just move to the next slide, please. So this slide just illustrates where we are in the budget planning cycle. This is quite a high level report, but what I'll aim to do as we go through is draw out some of the specific issues relating to this scrutiny committee. But in terms of the cycle, we brought the kind of financial strategy report back. It went to Cabinet back in July and to scrutiny committee in September. And this is now a kind of review where we've asked directorates to draw out some of their cost pressures, and we've done some further work around some of our budgetary assumptions in terms of the likely funding we expect to receive. In terms of in the background, we're now in that formulation of savings element in terms of looking to close the significant gap that we've identified as part of that piece of work. And then we'll be moving forward to bring initial proposals in January following the provisional assessment from Welsh Government with a view to approving the budget in March. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So within that, obviously there are some key elements of the financial strategy that we need to ensure that we adhere to. So in terms of delivering the corporate plan, but really key for this scrutiny committee is that we need to maintain that focus on supporting the most vulnerable, and therefore as we formulate our budget proposals, we need to make sure that we're offering that level of protection in terms of trying to make sure we deliver as many of those cost pressures that have been identified as possible, in terms of thinking about transformation proposals that might come forward to part of the saving strategy, ensuring that puts the individual at the centre rather than purely trying to identify savings. It's really important that we're developing a strategy that's going to give us sustainable finances. We know the outlook in terms of funding increases isn't great going forward, so we need to kind of utilise the reserves we have and the funding available to position ourselves well, not just for next year's budget, but also for the following years. Need to try and safeguard our reserves, and there are various other levers that we talk about in the budget report in terms of generating council tax and fees and charges. What's kind of key as well is just to draw out that it's really important that we have collective responsibility in terms of managing the council's finances, and we need to try and ensure that these finances are accessible and transparent as possible. So Amy, if you're able to pick up the next slide. Thank you. So this is a very high level summary of some of those figures that were drawn out in the budget report. So you'll see there's £10 million projected of additional funding. We did have some raw pressures that were submitted by directorates, and they amounted to £38 million, which obviously would have left us with a £28 million deficit. We have done some of the initial review of cost pressures to look at what absolutely has to be delivered, and that's a very challenging exercise. It's really taken a very tough look at those cost pressures, and obviously the gap between the cost pressures that we're proposing to take forward and the cost pressures that were initially submitted does need to be mitigated. That leaves us with an overall gap of about 10.5 million. There are various other additional things that we think may come through, but we think that will leave us having to close that gap and potentially find around £7.5 million of savings in the coming months. So that's taken at the moment. In terms of social care pressures, obviously there were significant pressures to raw £38 million worth of pressures, and we have done some work to bring those down. There are elements where no, you need to go away. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to mute myself one moment. Okay, thank you. So we have done some work to bring those pressures down, but we have maintained that approach of protecting the vulnerable. So those pressures have seen less of a reduction than perhaps in other directorate areas. There weren't specific pressures that were included in terms of leisure. So I suppose there's no specific issues to draw out as part of this report, but obviously that we know that there are continue to be some pressures around energy and also the ongoing cost of running some of those leisure facilities. Amy, if you're able to go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of next steps for the budget process, obviously we've had that UK government budget. We will be expecting to receive the Welsh Government settlement on the 19th of December, and work is ongoing in the background to identify savings and transformation proposals, to identify how we can set a sustainable budget, not just for 24-25, but over the medium term. When we bring the initial proposals back in January, and then on to scrutiny in February, that will be obviously a really key period for members to scrutinise the proposals that are being put forward in terms of the savings, but also where we're intending to allocate funding, some of those spending assumptions. We do obviously need to set the final budget by the 11th of March. So I believe we're coming to council in early March with those final budget proposals, following both the members' consultation, but also a 4-week public consultation as well. So those are the key points I was going to draw out in terms of the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we have quite a few items on the agenda this evening. We will have other technical matters going on for the first time, I'm sure. So I'm apologising for that. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Christine Cave.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit slow in coming into the meeting because there's quite a lot of buttons to press on the bottom of the screen to allow entry, but I guess you can hear me. I'm just wondering, when this item went to Cabinet, I note that one of the things that was said by the leader of the council is that she would like everybody to scrutinise these matters. And I think she actually said all 54 members should scrutinise the financial position at their scrutiny committees. And I just wondered, because there is this is such an area where there is overspend on this committee, I wonder if the chair and the committee is minded to think about inviting everyone, all of the 54 members, to have a look at the position for this scrutiny committee, because I do think it's important that we all have some insight into what is actually happening here. And I think in the presentation we were told we have to take collective responsibility. And yes, we absolutely do. I'm not sure we're always fully up to date with where the money is going. And I do wonder, in a previous scrutiny committee, in the Homes and Safer Communities Scrutiny Committee the year before last, when they were under a lot of pressure from COVID to provide increasing cover for people that were homeless, we actually set up a working party on that committee, and we had, as members, quite a lot of training and therefore in-depth understanding as to what the actual dilemmas were. And I do wonder, as a committee, whether we actually, this is our point in time when we really need to do that as a committee, to have some a working party, or all members of the committee, to have some additional insight into what is happening here, and some information as to how we can get a handle on this going forward. I noticed point 4 of the item when it came to Cabinet was looking at transformational options and cost savings, which is only right and prudent to do. But I have no idea what those are. There's no paperwork I can look at, or there's nowhere I can go to find out what we're looking at. And, you know, if Eddie Williams said at the Cabinet meeting that we have to be working in partnership, and yes, we do. But as a scrutiny member, I feel that I need to know more, and I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't think it can happen in a few passing of emails and answering of questions. I think what actually has to happen here, as we as a Scrutiny committee, we need either a working party or some more information so that we really have an in-depth understanding of what is happening.
Thank you, Christine. I think we should pass those comments on to Cabinet Office. I have asked for a more detailed report of where the money is going, particularly in social services. I've also asked that we have a report on recruitment, a special report just on recruitment. So I really welcome from anybody on this committee anything that they would like brought to it. So I really appreciate what you said, Christine, because the it is recommended that both the reference and appended cabinet report to review the work mitigating the cost pressures under the remit of the committee be noted. But as we've been told that even though it says noted, apparently it's not just for noting, they want to hear our feedback. So that is very much appreciated and absolutely genuine points that you made. Thank you, Christine. Does anybody else like to say anything?
So, sorry, Chair, could I just come back there?
Yes, of
I
course.
think it's within our, I know that we should pass on our comments to Cabinet, absolutely we should. But I think we have the capacity, the power as a committee to decide together this evening that we need to set up a working party and that we need to have more information. I think we can do that. I think we have the power and the energy and the need to do that because we don't have a full picture and we need a full picture before we can properly scrutinise what's happening here.
Yes, I agree, Christine, and especially with a lot of new councillors that we have on this committee, I think it would be good for them to join a working committee and set up a working committee. Could I have a show of hands, please, from the floor that you would like to go ahead with a working committee?
Are you happy to second Councillor Cave?
I am, yes, I second Councillor Cave. Councillor Robert Fisher. Councillor Jane Norman. Councillor Christine Cave. Well, that's enough for a working committee. Anybody else like to be on the working committee? Councillor Neil Thomas.
Just to confirm, that is Councillor Neil Thomas, Councillor Fisher,
Councillor
Cave and Councillor Ball.
Councillor Ball has
And
just
I
come up,
believe Councillor Norman also raised her hand. Is she wishing to be part of the working group as well?
Can you raise your hand again, please, Jane, if you wish to be on the working committee? Yes. Thank you, Jane. Okay, so we'll sort that out and let everybody know when our first meeting is. Excellent idea. Thank you. So can I have a show of hands for the recommendation, please, that both the reference and appended cabinet report to review the work mitigating the cost pressures under the remit of the committee be noted and that we send our comments over to cabinet as well.
And just to confirm, Chair, that the comments will be that the committee wishes to establish a working group.
Yes, yes, thank you.
And obviously the first, second recommendation was seconded by yourself and raised by Councillor Cave. Is it possible to have a mover and a seconder for the first recommendation, please?
I think Councillor Cave moved the first recommendation and I seconded.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so Neil, were you seconding the recommendation on agenda item 4? Go back to cabinet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Right, which takes us nicely into the next financial report, which is agenda item 5, the Q2 Revenue Monitoring 2023-24 report. Gemma. Gemma's still with us?
Apologies. Apologies, Chair. I didn't press to request to speak. Are we able to go back to the slides, please?
Absolutely, Gemma. Just bear with us one moment.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Amy. So if you were to skip on to slide number 8, please. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of the Q2 revenue position, this slide sets out the kind of overall position, but and you'll see there's some unplanned use of reserves across the council. And we'll obviously come back to the social services position, but that's obviously the most significant unplanned use of reserves. And there's also some residual variance that's being offset by policy underspend. This report also sets out a revised budget, which strips out the corporate recharges for things like office accommodation, HR, legal, finance, and the contact centre, which have traditionally been reported within individual service lines and that is now being shown against the corporate resources line. It's felt that that's going to more clearly show the control around some of that spend, which will set us up quite well for where we go forward and need to make savings against those lines. The report also some steps that have been taken corporately to mitigate the emerging overspends in the year, and that is things like a review of the capital programme, which is outlined in the capital report. It's around being very careful around getting sufficient approvals to proceed with any additional recruitment. It's also looking around where how we approve any discretionary expenditure that takes place to ensure that it's got the appropriate level of scrutiny. And I know there's been communications sent out across the organisation asking people and explaining the financial situation. Within social care, there's been some additional steps that have been taken, including a month-long audit of some of the social care placements that have been placed. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So this just pulls out some of the key areas of emerging overspend within the council, some of which will be funded from reserves. And we're actually projecting the social services reserve will have a nil balance at the end of this financial year. If we go on to the next slide, please, Amy. So specifically for social services, we have previously talked about a social services budget programme. We have taken the decision that in the context of the kind of savings challenges that we're seeing and the funding pressures within social services, it would actually make more sense to cease that specific budget program and have a more strategic integrated program of transformation for future years. So what we've done is we've looked to include those unfunded elements of the social services budget program as cost pressures as part of the 24-25 position, and we will come back as part of the January proposals with a kind of integrated transformation and savings program, rather than social services having to deal with lots of different savings programs. As you'll also be aware, the social services budget was expected to utilise £2 million of step-in funding, and this is partly because whilst we increased funding to address some of the commissioning issues that we were seeing in the adult social care sector, we didn't necessarily expect that capacity to be coming through straight away, and actually that's made really good progress in terms of cutting down on those uncommissioned care elements and some of those waiting times. But that does mean we need to utilise that £2 million step-in funding from reserves. So overall, we've got an adverse variance of 8.269 million, and that's being offset, as I said on the previous slide, by some unplanned reserves and also some underspend from elsewhere in the council budget. The planned drawdown from reserves for 23-24 is a planned amount of 4,028,000 and a further unplanned amount of 5.884 million, which is required to offset the additional adverse variance. And obviously, as set out, this poses significant additional budgetary pressures as we go forward into 24-25. And we really need to ensure that we're addressing this shortfall as well as the emerging pressures for 24-25 as part of that budget setting process. If we're able to go on to the next slide, please, Amy. So just to draw out some of those key pressures that we're seeing. So we're really seeing some significant pressures in the children and young people services sector. So rising costs associated with placements for children and young people, and that's due to an increase in the number of looked after children, but also for the complexity and cost of some of those placements. We're seeing some additional pressure around legal costs, and that's partly due to an increase in the incidence of care proceedings, but also the complexity of those care proceedings. In the adult sector, we're seeing an increase in care hours required for adults, and some of that could be because of a return to care following COVID, an increase in the incidence of things like double-handed care, and also we're expecting some of that increase because of the ageing demographic in our population. The service is also reporting an increase in residential and nursing placements and an increase in direct care placements and respite. We have seen historically that the cost of placements can sometimes peak at this time of year, and we have seen some reductions in the cost of adult care in more recent monitoring that's been reported internally, because of course this is the Q2 position. That has been offset to a certain extent by overspends elsewhere in the social care budget, but it's something that we need to keep under review as we progress through the year. If you're able to go on to the next slide, please. In terms of leisure, we have no specific pressures that be reported at this stage. We have previously seen some pressures that have been reported through from Parkwood around energy pressures, and we need to keep that under review as we progress through the winter. And then if you could just go on to the next slide, please. In terms of efficiencies, social services are making a good progress on the savings targets. There is some shortfall, but that's largely due to the kind of timing of the provision that's outlined within the savings coming on to be available for placement, and also the timing of moving those children into that provision. So social services is well placed to make those savings on a recurring basis in future years, albeit we are obviously, as reported in the paper, we are seeing that offset by other emerging pressures elsewhere. And then just to pick up the final slide, which sets out the reserves position. So we can see a significant reduction in reserves. A lot of that is planned reduction in reserves around capital funding, for instance, and also the housing revenue account. But you will see that unplanned drawdown from reserves column with significant pressure around the social services reserve, which we expect to be completely utilised in year as things currently stand. Okay, those are the main points I was going to draw out on the revenue report, but happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions from anybody? Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Gemma. It does make difficult reading, as the Chair said at the beginning of the meeting. Have you had an opportunity to factor in any of the impacts of the autumn statement, which seems to be a continuation of austerity? The budgets coming down to local government don't seem to have been enhanced. The opportunity was missed there. And I'm also concerned about the implications of the nil balance in reserves at the end of the year and the implications of that going forward. So perhaps you could comment on that, please.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the any consequentials that we would see as part of the autumn statement, I don't think we've seen anything favourable as it stands at the moment. So we aren't expecting any specific additional funding that will benefit the council's budget and specifically social care. So obviously continue to keep that position under review, and it may be that Welsh Government are able to direct. So all the messages that we've had to date, it seems to suggest that that won't be possible for 24-25. In terms of the budget positions, the reserve positions, apologies. I agree, it is concerning. I mean, I think the social care budget can be really volatile, so it is helpful to have a reserve risk associated reserves, specifically around items such as pay, such as and risk, and around energy and corporate landlord, as well as maintaining a general fund, although the general fund isn't enormous, and obviously you can only use reserves once. So there are specific reserves that can be utilised by the service. There's also a legal claims reserve for specific issues that could emerge, and that will give us an element of resilience as we go forward.
Yes, thanks, Gemma. That clears that to a certain extent. And we are a big spending directorate, given that our legal commitments to things like care for the elderly and also responding to childcare. And I'm aware that the directorate is trying to keep this under control, but we only need a couple of very, very high budget clients who can cost the directorate considerable amounts of money. We know that sort of some childcare provision can cost eye-wateringly large amounts because of their specific needs, and I know that we are trying to mitigate that. But if a child needs, say, or we have more than a couple of children that needs upwards of 400 grand placements, which is possible, then we are going to be paring to the bone, and this can present challenges going forward for the directorate. I think that we need to sort of again draw this attention to the attention of Cabinet when they're looking at budgets and looking at the way in which things are shared around the various directorates, and for them to bear that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Gemma. Anybody else? No, well, we've had regard to the content of the report. It's informed us of the projected revenue outturn for 23-24. And the recommendation is that the position with regard to the authority's 23-24 revenue budget is noted. So we're all happy for it to be noted. Show your can you put your pictures up if you thank you. Is that moved and seconded?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Moving on now to agenda item 6, the last of the financial reports today, the capital monitoring for the period of the 1st of April to the 30th of September 2023. Gemma again. Thank you, Gemma.
Okay, thank you. So in capital report, Amy, would you mind sharing the slides again for me? Apologies. And this just picks up on slide 16. So the first slide I'll just
Sorry,
talk
Gemma.
about very briefly.
Sorry, Gem, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. We're getting the slides up ready for you now, but just to let you know, your audio has been breaking up then quite badly. I'm just wondering if you've got any other operating systems open on your computer at all, like Teams or anything like that, that you could close down, which might help with your bandwidth. Just whilst my
I hadn't.
colleague...
Has that improved, Amy?
Yes, it has. Yes. Just bear with.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, just 1 second, and we'll get the slides up for you. Okay, Gemma, over to yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of the capital monitoring position for quarter 2, if you're able to go to the next slide, please, Amy. For this slide, just the overall position. Obviously, we've got a very significant capital programme in the 23-24 of 129 million. Obviously, we're forecasting an outturn of just short of 108 million, but only actually have spend to date of 26 million. So a significant amount of spend still to come through, which absolutely can happen with some of the sustainable communities for learning and new build housing schemes. If you're able to go on to the next slide, please. This report does include the capital review, so a full review of the capital programme in the context of some of the spending challenges we've been seeing was undertaken prior to the quarter 2 monitoring, and a number of schemes have been taken out of the programme. These are largely schemes that perhaps wouldn't have been able to progress due to resources anyway, but they have been reviewed for priority. In terms of schemes taken out of the programme specific to this committee, there was a scheme for WICIS implementation, which had a residual balance of it. The balance was quite small, and it wouldn't have been large enough to progress a full scheme, and so that's been taken out. And there was also a small scheme that was again had a residual balance in relation to IT developments. So both of those schemes have been taken out of the capital programme. And just moving on to the next slide, please. There are a number of other items that are relevant to this scrutiny committee. So there are 5 requests under the main body of the report that add new schemes for social services. There's an electric bike scheme. We also have relevant to leisure, the inclusion of an air handling unit at Lantwick Leisure Centre and flooring at Colcott Sports Hall, and some increases for existing scheme budgets for Community and Leisure Centre and Bellevue. We have a request for slippage, which is outlined on this slide and in the report, and we also have a delegated authority to add the UK Government Shared Prosperity funding into the capital programme as part of this report, and that included funding for Knapskate Park. So those are the key points I was going to draw out on this report, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Anybody? No. Well, we have 4 recommendations, and the reasons for the recommendations are to advise us of the progress of the capital programme, and that recommendation is that the progress made on delivering 23-24 capital programme within the remit of the committee be noted in the attached appendix. Is everybody happy to move that? Neil?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
And anybody else? No, I'll second that then. Thank you. And the reason for the second recommendation is to advise us of the use of delegated authority. So the recommendation is that the use of delegated authority within the remit of the committee as set out in paragraph 2.44 of the report be noted.
Move that recommendation.
Second, thank you. And agenda item 3, the recommendation 3 was to advise committee of the use of emergency powers. So the recommendation is that the use of emergency powers within the remit of the committee as detailed in the attached appendix 1 to the report be noted.
Again, I'll move.
Thank you. Second. And the reason for agenda item 4 recommendation was to advise the committee of charges to the capital programme. So the recommendation therefore is that the charges of the 23-24 and the future years capital programme within the remit of the committee, summarised in paragraphs 2.3 to 2.5 and detailed within the body of the report from paragraph 2.14 be noted.
Again, I'll move.
Noted. Thank you. Second. Which takes us on.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, Councillor Christine Cave.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I think during your summary of the way forward here, the recommendations, I put my hand up. I don't think I could be seen. I just want to say the use of emergency powers did come up at last night's full council meeting, where there appeared to be no way for anybody to talk about the use of emergency powers. And so I presume the use of emergency powers can only be discussed at scrutiny. And what we're being asked here is not to scrutinise them, but to note them. And so I just wonder, I'm just a bit curious about how we can properly scrutinise the use of emergency powers when we're not really fully aware of how they were determined, and we're not really quite sure how we should be scrutinising them. Because if we can't scrutinise them at full council and we're just asked to note them here, where do they get scrutinised?
I'm going to bring Amy in on this one. Amy?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. So obviously the recommendation is correct, as Councillor Cave has pointed out, is for the committee to note. The emergency powers have been moved as per the council's constitution, and therefore obviously the scrutiny is taken at the time that the emergency power is raised. Therefore the committee this evening are not scrutinising that decision because the decisions have been made.
Do you want to come back in? Do you want to come back in, Christine? Yeah, Councillor Christine Cave.
Yeah, I just want to come back and say thank you for clarifying that point.
Thank you. Right, that takes us on to agenda item 8. We're moving 7 and 8 around. So the first one will be agenda item 8, which is the Children and Young People Service Annual Placement Review. I think, Rachel, are you doing this? Are you here, Rachel? Is Rachel with us? Yes, there you are. Hi, Rachel.
It will be Karen presenting, and then we'll both assist with questions. Thank you.
Have we got Karen? Is Karen with us? Yes. Hello, Karen.
I'm here, Chair. Hi. If it's okay with you, Chair, I'll just briefly summarise the annual placements review and then take questions later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Some will be familiar with the annual placements review. It is an annual report which looks back at the figures and actions taken over the past 18 months in relation to placement provision for children looked after in the Vale of Glamorgan. Pages 1 to 3 describes how this area of activity and expenditure is challenging and complex, and how there are a number of external influences which impact this area, including children with complex needs, the Welsh Government's When I'm Ready scheme, remand placements, COVID-19 and the cost of living crisis, and the Home Office's National Transfer Scheme. Pages 3 to 5 describes the aims and objectives of the corporate strategy for children in need of care and support, which underpins our work with children and families. Pages 5 and 6 provides information in relation to the number of looked after children and where they are placed. We can see the population increased from March 2022 to September 2023 by 54, and the greatest increase is in the friends and families foster care, also known as kinship care. We can also see significant increases in our use of IFA's independent fostering agencies. Page 7 also shows the children looked after data from neighbouring local authorities, Cardiff, RCT and Merthyr. Page 8 looks at our external placements budget, and during 2022-23, this budget was overspent by 228,764. Pages 8 to 12 looks at some of the initiatives and activity undertaken during the year, including the external placements audit, which looks at the suitability of placements for children and where we can identify alternative placements. Our internal foster carer recruitment strategy, looking at how we increase the numbers of our own foster carers. The development of local residential provision for children in partnership with our third sector providers, Llanmai and Action for Children, to open 2 new residential homes, one of which is already open and the second is awaiting registration. The joint budget for children requiring residential care and education, and the Children Looked After Reduction Project Board, where we safely identify children who no longer need to be looked after, and we look to discharge their care orders. Without these work streams, our children looked after population would be much higher. And finally, page 13 looks at the opportunities and the activities underway this year to manage this area of activity. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions from anybody? I mean, the committee. Yeah, Neil.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen, for the report. Again, it is what it is. I know from my role on the corporate parenting panel that we see these reports regularly as well, and that the general trend at the moment is upward, partly, I think, due to the economic situation that we're suffering, also due to the ongoing impact of COVID on the psychology of some of our children and the way that they're behaving as a consequence of the damage that perhaps COVID did to their psychological well-being. I welcome the move to look more in-house for fostering, and I would urge people and the department to encourage more local foster carers to advertise more widely, drops in various mail things as well as social media. Something may be going out with the council tax when that goes out in the spring might be helpful, with more explanation of of what's involved and how to get involved. But we do need to recruit more foster carers within county to help reduce costs. But again, thank you, Karen, for your report.
Yes, thank you, Karen. Is there anybody else that would like to comment to help inform the next stages of implementation in relation to the priorities highlighted? Anybody? No. Okay, well, in that case, it is recommended that the Vale of Glamorgan Council Children and Young People Service Annual Placement Review October 2023 report as attached at Appendix 1 be noted. and that a further annual report be received by the committee at its October 2024 meeting, and 3, that both the covering and appended report be referred to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee.
I'll move on, Black.
Thank you. Second. Which takes us now to agenda 7, which is the Cardiff and Vale Glamorgan Market Stability Report 2022 Annual Delivery Plan. Ian Macmillan, hi, welcome, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. I'm here to share the key changes and findings in relation to our annual review of the Market Stability Report and to receive feedback from you as a committee in relation to these findings. The legislative framework for the development and publication of the Market Stability Report is set out in the Policy Framework section of the document. The initial Market Stability Report was developed by the Regional Partnership Board following engagement with key stakeholders throughout 21-22. As the report highlights, the market stability assessment needs to be kept under regular review and revised where appropriate so that the Market Stability Report remains a live and relevant document. The first market stability for the region was published in 2022, and during this year, through discussions with ourselves and Cardiff Council, we decided to commit ourselves to reviewing the market stability assessment as local authorities rather than on a regional footprint and then sharing findings with each other. The purpose of this scrutiny report is to inform you of the changes in demand and sufficiency that have taken place in the market since the original engagement work was undertaken in 21-22. So taking you on to section 2 of the report, I think it's really important that this report is considered in the context of the increasing pressures that we've discussed at this committee in relation to children and young people services and adult services. There are now more adults and children requiring care and support in the Vale of Glamorgan when the original Market Stability Report was produced. If we think about the context for the original Market Stability Assessment, it was in a time when we were emerging from COVID, and there have been substantial changes to some parts of the market that have taken place within a relatively short period of time. So I just want to explain to the committee the exercise that was undertaken during Q2 of this year. Our commissioning team worked really hard to engage with internal officers and external agencies in order to assess how the market had changed. The focus was really on the commissioning needs of the service and what they would be up until 2027. And 2027 is a key date for us because that's when the Market Stability Report will need to be revised and reproduced. Focus groups were held with officers and discussions took place with agencies, and we really concentrated on changes to the market and to service needs. And we worked really closely with the business intelligence and performance team because the data was essential to informing some of those discussions. We were able to analyse data trends that have taken place since 2022, and a significant wealth of analysed data was provided for the workshops. And that's really allowed us to make projections on trends within the market and be able to identify our commissioning priorities for the future. And these are the priorities that are highlighted within this report. However, I think it's important that I make it clear these aren't the only priorities that we have for us as a service. These are just the key headlines that we have from reviewing the market. And I think it's inevitable that other commissioning priorities will emerge, but I think we can be clear that some of these are clear, up-to-date priorities for the service. I think it's really important to say as well, this report only contains projections. Just because numbers are headed in a certain way, it isn't inevitable that they will end up at that point. And as a service, we remain really focused on de-escalating need at the earliest opportunity and where possible, preventing it from escalating. I think this exercise has really told us that the market itself is really volatile and there are likely to be events that this report can't predict that will take place in the future that will impact on future trends. Having said that, I'm going to take you through the priorities that we've identified within the report. I'm going to start with children and young people service, but I'll try not to replicate too much of Karen's updates already. Okay, so moving on to section 2.3 of the report. During the last 2 years, the Home Office has continued to allocate a significant increase in the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children with us in the Vale of Glamorgan. I think it's really important to highlight that we are corporate parents for those children and young people. The majority of those young people who are placed with us are are aged between 16 and 18 and frequently have a significant level of need. Those young people often require supported accommodation, and it was identified we'd need to acquire a minimum of 2 further homes within the Vale of Glamorgan. I know that Karen and Rachel and the team are working really hard around plans to secure appropriate accommodation to move this further and to work in conjunction with third sector providers. And on a similar theme, there's a growing demand for supported accommodation for care leavers. We often support care leavers in accommodation post-18. That can be a when I'm ready placement, but sometimes those young people need supported accommodation where they can move and develop their independent living skills. Our projections identify we'll need a further 2 supported accommodation homes by 2027, and we would envisage working with the third sector in relation to those provisions. The eliminating profit agenda is continuing to have an impact on children's residential care and will continue to do so into the future. The Vale of Glamorgan is in a much stronger position. Karen's already talked to us about the work that's been undertaken in relation to 2 residential homes. It will be really important for that work to continue. We have identified this as a priority need for the service, and we identified there is a growing need for residential provision for 8 to 14-year-olds. So again, we'll need to continue to work in conjunction with the third sector in relation to this need. Karen's talked to us about the importance of foster carers, and it continues to be an area of priority for us. We're going to continue to need to recruit more foster carers and more in-house foster carers. A particular area of specialist need is for parent and child placements. That's for parents who need a lot of additional support and within a supportive environment. It's an area where newborn babies will often go for a period of support and assessment, and it's recognised that we need to do more to be able to recruit more of those types of specialist carers. We've also seen a recent increase in children being referred to the Regional Adoption Service. It's a relatively recent increase, and I know that Children and Young People Service are really focused on reducing this figure. But if numbers continue on current projections, there will need to be an increase in improved adoption doctors to meet this demand. So on to adult services. You'll all be cited on the challenges within the market in relation to domiciliary care. The market across Wales remains really challenging. It's really positive news that as a region we've made significant strides, and we're in a much better position than a lot of Wales. That's in part due to new providers joining the market. It's also been due to some of the relaxation on overseas workers obtaining visas to work in the UK, and there's been a lot of hard work by the Commission and the finance team in relation to processes into this area. However, I think we can be reasonably certain there's going to be further fragility in this area. There's a lot of uncertainty around future recruitment into this area, and we can't rely on the market continuing to grow in the way that it has been. The demand for care at home in the Vale is projected to increase, and and that's from a very high base that it is at the moment. The reality is that we're going to have to continue to be really creative and innovative to ensure we can meet increased demand for care at home in the future. And whilst the population will continue to receive more care at home, if you look at the ongoing trends identified within the original market stability assessment, the population needs assessment in conjunction with the projections from this report, we know that a certain percentage of the population are projected to require nursing and residential care. And that's a particular challenge for us in the Vale because of the demographics of the Vale and the aging population that we have here. We find in particular that the numbers of people in residential care had dropped quite significantly during the COVID period. They'd returned to their original heights, and demand is continuing to increase. We talked to the market in terms of the plans for the future, and a number of homes are planning to adapt their homes to meet the needs of those with dementia, because that's a growing need. But also to be able to support those who need those in the younger age group who have a dementia diagnosis. Many of you will be cited that there is currently a new provider coming to the market. That is the home in Wenvo, but there are other market providers who are looking to extend current provisions within their homes, and they've talked to us about converting their current provisions. In any event, the report found there'd be increased need for residential and nursing care provision, So the market will need to continue to work with us in terms of meeting that increased need. I think it's really positive to note we haven't experienced any recent home closures within the Vale, but we do know that there are going to be challenging conversations in terms of fee setting for next year, and there remains some fragility within the market. Likewise, the need for extra care accommodation is predicted to increase. The new facility in Penarth is going to make a significant impact, but it's a growing area of need and we'll need to be able to closely monitor that. There's also a growing need for supported living accommodation for adults with learning disabilities. We'll need to continue to work to identify properties that can be utilised to meet this need, and I know this is an area that Linda Woodley is working really hard on with the third sector. So I think you'll note there's a real theme in relation to accommodation being needed across children and adult services. I just wanted to reassure you that as an SSMT within social services, we're working really hard to access regional and national funding in order to be able to secure the capital required for a number of these key projects to be able to move forward. And you'll note on a number of occasions I talk about how we're working really closely with the third sector in relation to a number of those projects. In the same way that we need to have an increased number of foster carers, we also need to recruit more shared lives placement hosts, particularly as we know that a number of those people who are in that role will be reaching an age where they retire in the next few years. So we need to not only replace them, we need to recruit more. There's also a need to increase employment support and opportunities for disabled citizens within the Vale, and I think we can all see the benefits of this scheme. And then finally, in terms of the issue of recruiting staff, that was a central theme in terms of all of our discussions, those discussions that took place both internally and externally. The reality is that without staff in place to support those commission providers or us internally, we won't be able to provide the care and support that's required. And although we found that the market for a variety of social care roles had improved since 21-22 slightly, it remains incredibly fragile. So just moving on to section 5 of the report, and I'm really conscious that the report evidences lots of areas where the projections are upwards, and if the projections within this report are correct, there are significant resource implications for us as a council. The combination of increased need for social care for children as well as adults is not just an issue for us in the Vale of Glamorgan. Councils across Wales are all facing these challenges. However, I think it's fair to say it remains one of the biggest challenges that we have for us as a council. As a service within social services, we're really focused on being transformational in our approach to offering statutory provisions. We recognise that we'll have to meet this increased need in a very challenging budget climate. We're going to continue to focus our efforts on the combination of preventing need going upstream and on delivering services to those with the greatest level of need. I think you'll all agree that this is a really difficult balancing act, particularly in the context of having reduced resources to meet this growing demand. However, we're already taking steps to transform services to adapt to this new climate. Just in terms of next steps for this report, we're required to update Welsh Government annually on changes to sufficiency and stability in the market. So we've agreed at the Regional Commissioning Board that following this scrutiny committee, the plan is for this report to be submitted to Welsh Government, and the Cardiff Council have already agreed to follow this approach. Thank you for listening this evening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have actually asked for a report to come to committee about recruitment so that we can maybe help you and find out what you're doing to recruit. It does sound like a huge problem, which is why I've asked for a report. I'll chase Lance up on this. Councillor, and thank you very much for an in-depth report. Can I bring in Councillor Christine Cave now, please?
Hello, thank you for the report. As you say, it's very in-depth, and I was interested to have an understanding of how you're trying to keep this a live document. At the same time as believing that it will end in 2027 and you'll go through the whole thing again, because hopefully if you keep it a live document, you won't have too much work, hopefully, to do at 2027, because the work seems to be ongoing if you're keeping a live document in that way. I wonder if you could tell me what you spoke a lot about transformational services and how you're constantly trying to be really ahead of the curve here and make sure we can deliver things in an efficient and high quality way. I just wondered, could you tell us as a scrutiny committee, we'd be very interested to hear what's the one piece of transformation that you're most proud of?
I think if we were to look as a committee in terms of where we were this time last year, Councillor Cave, and I can't pretend to take any of the credit for this, the position in relation to domiciliary care, members of this committee would have been cited on just how challenging the position was within the Vale. We had quite significant waiting lists for people who were waiting to receive services, and often that meant delays in terms of care being received. I think that the fact is this point in time that we've got the challenge in terms of Wales, and that people are waiting a matter of days often to receive that care. That's a huge success for us within the Vale, and that has to be recognised. However, I think I pointed out within my report that transformation can't stand still, can it? And I think we, at the moment we're looking at areas like social enterprises. We're looking in particular in areas where it's particularly hard to recruit, and it's particularly hard to put services in, particularly within the west of the Vale. And what more we can do to prevent the challenge that will undoubtedly come around the corner.
Could you just, I can see that a lot of work has been and a lot of emphasis has been put on this issue to address some of these major problems. And as you say, in the Western Vale, we particularly have lots of challenges. I think when I spoke recently, back in September, there were more people waiting in the Western Vale for services than anywhere else. And if you've turned that round into a matter of days, that's absolutely fantastic. I wonder, talking about these challenges we face, it'd be really interesting to hear how you managed to do that. It's great that you've done it. It's fantastic. Hats off to you. But how did you do that?
I think if we were just referring to domiciliary care, it's the work that we've undertaken with the market. The reality is that we're relying on private providers and the third sector to support us in terms of this agenda. Gaynor, who's our operational manager for commissioning and finance, and the team have worked really closely with providers. There's a forum that's in place, we've received excellent feedback on from the inspectorate, where we work really closely with providers. We talk closely to the market in terms of the needs of the service. I think we have very honest conversations with them in terms of some of the challenges within the market, and we work very closely in terms of being able to unpick where there are really complex packages of care, and certainly runs of care, for example, within the west of the Vale. We've also worked really closely with some new providers that have come into the market, and we've been quite honest with them in terms of the packages that are available. And we've really promoted some of those packages within those hard to reach areas, and we've made it clear the expectations is those providers support us in terms of picking up those packages.
Yeah, so if we were to sort of unpick that a bit further and say, so what's the thing that you've done that you would say was transformational, is that you've actually asked the providers that you already have not to be exclusive to one area, but to widen their reach. And that by providing that wider reach and helping them to understand that they have to meet the demand more widely. I'm just trying to summarise what you've said here. I think that has brought about the transformation and cut down the number of days that people are waiting, or in fact the number of weeks or months that they're waiting. It's brought that down drastically. Is that a fair summary of what you said? Yeah,
well, it certainly made a significant difference, and I think the figures tell the story there.
Yes, and that's the difficulty for this committee. You've sort of summarised that really well, because we're often given figures and we have absolutely a small grain of understanding what is behind those figures, and that's why I'm particularly interested this evening to unpick where the transformation is occurring, so that I can have an understanding of where the transformation might occur going forward, because certainly in this area we do need to look at transformation. And I think that a wider conversation with everyone about the problems that we're facing, and to believe that everybody is in their own way creative, and that the more people we speak to, the more ability we have to be transformational. When we keep within our silos, you know, when you have those conversations, maybe with your own team or with the providers, that, you know, that's great in itself. But actually, there's you know, the people that receive the service and the people that might be looking for the service in the future, and our scrutiny committee, you know, and I'm just suggesting that transformation doesn't occur usually within silos. It occurs when there's wider conversations. And I'm just looking to see, perhaps as a scrutiny committee, how we can focus on that a little bit more, and maybe help in some way. You know, you spoke about the demand for fosterers, and that our foster carers are an ageing population, and that actually we need to increase our foster carers. And I just wonder how we're probably getting the message out in a lot of different places. But as a scrutiny member, I'd like to know where that is occurring and how that we might do it in a bigger way, or a more tailored way, or just in a different way than we're doing at the moment. It's not a criticism. It's just me trying to gain some understanding of where transformation, which has been spoken about quite a lot this evening in our report, is going to actually be achieved. But thank you for that. And yes, a very in-depth report, and it would be good to have this report come to us more regularly, I think.
Thank you.
Sorry. Did you want to come in, Lance? Lance, did you want to come in? You need to come.
Hello? Thank you. I think I can see myself on the screen now, so I'm assuming that I am in. I was feeling a little bit sorry for Ian in terms of the question about domiciliary care, recognising he hasn't been with us for very long, although fortunately he has been here for a lot of the period where things have improved significantly. I think I suppose there's a general issue in terms of transformation and the involvement of scrutiny committees. We're obviously happy to bring any reports that you would like. We've obviously brought reports on foster care and so on at various times, and I think that's probably the right time to get into the detail of the work that we're doing around those areas. But I suppose just to flesh out a little bit, but more specifically with regard to the change in domiciliary care, there was an extensive action plan put in place. We developed a workshop initially quite internally, because you tend to want to have a bit of freedom to think of ideas, and sometimes potentially think some things that may be silly, and actually to have the opportunity to explore those. And I think, you know, there were some things that I just would add to what Ian said in terms of in terms of probably that made a significant difference in terms of domiciliary care numbers. So one was the extension of the Your Choice programme. So that's our outcome-based domiciliary care programme. You're familiar with that already, but that has extended quite significantly in terms of the amount of people that are supported through that mechanism. The other one, of course, was in April last year, we substantially increased the fees for domiciliary care. That had an impact, and I suppose what that allowed our providers to do was to pay their staff more, and to ensure that they were funded for travel time between visits. And I think probably the other things that you know include lots of detail, really fine detail work, whether that's actually going through every single agency's website and looking to see whether that agency is advertising the way that they say they are, if their advert is up to date, does it have the right pay rate on, does it have all those things. That's work we'd never done before to do it, but we undertook as part of our large action plan. And I think things made the biggest difference. I think collectively together they all helped, and I'm really much more positive position now. But there has been a financial impact, and I think that was very, very apparent earlier on in the scene. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Does anybody have any more questions?
Yes.
Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report, Liam. And in terms of things that we are leading on, things that we that should be of interest to this committee, I draw your attention to the report last time from Vale Telecare, which is having a huge impact on domiciliary care. We're leading the way on that, and it is helping more people stay in their homes for longer and safer. We are also working, I think, with the UHB on things like step-down care, and again, we're, I think, in a positive position there in that we are looking at new and innovative ways of doing that. There are going to be consequences to some national policies coming down from Westminster, for example. The stated intention yesterday by the Home Secretary to reduce the number of overseas care workers coming to this country, which again is going to impact the kind of care offers that we can provide, and this is going to have to be given very careful note and consideration, I think, going forward, but by the department. And I just wonder whether you've got any views on that. Thank you.
Ian, thank you.
Yeah. I think we'll have to closely consider what they will potentially mean for us. I mean, internally we have recruited from overseas. The numbers aren't significant, but they have supported us in terms of the workforce. I think the impact will be more significant potentially on private providers. We've seen a significant number of workers come from overseas who are based within the capital, and that's certainly been one of the reasons why our region is in a stronger place than others in terms of being able to provide services in terms of domiciliary care. I think it's too early for any of us to know at the moment. I think there are certainly risk factors, and we're aware of how fragile the market is. So any market that's fragile, which is impacted by an external force, it's something we'll certainly need to consider and take into account.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much for your report. We have nobody else waiting to ask questions. So the recommendations are that the changes to the market since publication of the Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan Market Stability Report, MSR, as per the key changes and local priorities set out in the report, be noted. Any comments that one would like to add to that? No. Can we note it then?
Yeah, move you know.
Thank you. Second. And that takes us very nicely on to agenda item 9, which is Lance's report. We receive this twice a year. It's the Corporate Safeguarding Summary Report, Cabinet 16th of November 2023. Lance, thank you.
I will be brief because I'm aware that the annual reports came quite recently due to the recess and so on. So this is an update that we do in between. So it doesn't have an appendix. It's a brief report just to ensure that members are cited on the activity of the corporate safeguarding group and the work that we're doing to make sure that the council operates as safely as it can for its residents and staff. I suppose the key developments in that fairly short time period have been around improvements in monitoring of safeguarding data, a review of our training and the accompanying materials that go with that, and some improvements in how we share the learning from serious case reviews, as they were called now, child practice reviews and adult practice reviews that happen across our region, i.e. Cardiff and Vale. That's where our regional safeguarding board operates. So it's gone to Cabinet in order to be shared with all scrutiny committees, and so I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has.
Does anybody have any questions? No. Well, the recommendation is that both the reference and appended Cabinet report on the activity that has been undertaken in relation to corporate arrangements for safeguarding across the council be noted. The reasons for the recommendation was to regard the content of the report to provide assurance around safeguarding activity taking place across the council, as well as to ensure that there is a wide-reaching level of member oversight. Have somebody move that, please?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Thank you. I'll second. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is the report of the Director of Social Services once more. Lance, the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q2, performance 23 to 24. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm sure you're familiar with these reports now and have seen them a number of times, and so they're also quite lengthy, and so you won't want me to talk about them at length. I think the key parts of this report for me are around the pages 7 and 8 of the slideshow. I think it's good to see the progress that we've made in terms of how we're working with our communities and supporting people at home. I think that's really positive to see. So I'm happy to answer any questions or ask my colleagues to field them if it's beyond my knowledge. So I'll just move straight to that. If that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any comments or recommendations from the committee to the Cabinet? Anybody? No. Well, the recommendations are that the Q2 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 2023-24 commitments as aligned to the Council's corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of the committee be noted. A mover, please.
I'll move.
Seconder. Okay, I'll second. Thank you. And the recommendation 2 is that the remedial actions to be taken to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified with the remit of the committee be noted.
Moving note.
Second, thank you. Which moves us on once more. Any items which the chair has decided are urgent? Part 1, I have none. And I have no urgent in part 2 either. So it just falls on me to wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. The next meeting is the 9th of January. Be kind, be loving, and party over Christmas. Good night. God bless.
Merry Christmas all.
Good night now.